Thank you, Madam President. It is a sad day, another low in the history of this august body that is entrusted with primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. Pakistan deeply regrets the failure of this Council to adopt the draft resolution tabled by the 10 elected members, and which was an effort to address one of the most grave and sustained humanitarian catastrophes of our time. Once again, the elected members have shown that they are here, ready and willing to fully assume the responsibilities that have been entrusted to them by being members of this Council on behalf of the general membership. Madam President, we are appalled that this Council once again stands immobilized in the face of mass suffering, atrocity, and unfolding tragedy. The veto cast today sends an extremely dangerous message that the lives of over 2 million Palestinians, besieged, starved, and relentlessly bombarded, are dispensable. This will remain not only a moral stain on the conscience of this Council, but a fateful moment of political abdication that will reverberate for generations. We have heard yet again the familiar refrain that this is not the right time and that space must be given to ongoing negotiations. But how much more space do we need? Space filled with rubble, graves, and the anguished cries of children. How much more time do we need? What amount of evidence do we need before we say enough and put to stop this barbarity and savagery perpetrated under a brutal occupation? While this Council deliberated and delayed, Gaza has been decimated. This is no longer a humanitarian crisis. It is a collapse of humanity and of international law and all that this Council is supposed to stand for. As the President of the ICRC noted, Gaza is worse than hell on earth. Over 54,000 civilians have been killed, among them 28,000 women and girls and 18,000 children. In the last 24 hours alone, nearly 100 Palestinians have been killed and more than 400 wounded. Entire neighborhoods lie in ruin. Famine stalks the land. Disease and despair now spread more quickly than any aid can arrive. And while Gaza bleeds and this Council has been muzzled, the world has spoken. The International Court of Justice has issued binding provisional measures. The General Assembly has adopted numerous resolutions. The United Nations, humanitarian organizations, global civil society, people on the streets across the world, and increasingly voices from within Israel itself have recognized that what is unfolding is not merely war, but the systematic destruction of a people. War crimes, genocide. Madam President, in one of the most chilling developments, Palestinian civilians have been shot and killed while attempting to access food. And we think that to kill innocent civilians for seeking bread and water is not only a war crime, it is a tragic indictment of a system that criminalizes survival and militarizes humanitarian aid. in flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. Aid dropped from the sky or delivered under armed escort is not a solution. It is a spectacle. And to defend these arrangements is not pragmatism. It is a moral failure. It is totally unacceptable. The draft resolution before us today was objective, balanced, principled, and rooted firmly in the UN Charter and the most basic tenets of humanitarian law. It asks for no more than what any human being deserves: food for starving children, medicine for the wounded, shelter for the displaced, the right to life, an end to killing, therefore. And it also asks for the release of the hostages. And it is also supporting the efforts that are underway to bring about a ceasefire. That even such modest, urgent demands could not pass underscores the depth of this Council's dysfunction. Let us be clear. This failure will not go down in records as a mere procedural footnote. It will be remembered as a complicity, a green light for continued annihilation, a moment where the entire world was expecting action, but yet again this Council was blocked and prevented by one member from carrying out its responsibility. Pakistan reaffirms its unwavering support for the Palestinian people in their just struggle for dignity, justice, and self-determination. We reiterate our calls for an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire, full, unfettered humanitarian access, and an end to the inhumane blockade of Gaza. A just, lasting, and comprehensive solution to the question of Palestine, rooted in international law and based on the establishment of a viable, contiguous, and sovereign Palestinian state on pre-1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital in accordance with relevant UN resolutions. History will judge how each member of this Council chose to respond at this hour of moral reckoning. Together with the majority of the Council members, Pakistan stands firmly on the side of humanity, of legality and justice. We urge the holdouts to do the same before Gaza becomes not only a wound on the world's conscience, but a permanent scar on the credibility of this Council. And President, but we don't end here. We are not going to lay idle. We are going to continue and redouble our efforts for the cause of peace in line with our responsibility as a responsible member of this Council. We will continue to call for accountability and an end to impunity that Israel, the occupying power, continues to enjoy. We shall continue to recall and remind that the root cause of the problem, the challenges confronting the region, is the decades-long illegal Israeli occupation of the Arab lands, including the occupied Palestinian territories. The way forward, in our view, is in addressing and tackling that root cause head-on. That is by ending the occupation. It is not by mercilessly and mindlessly killing the Palestinians, who are the oppressed people in this case, or by making them starve, or by trying to evict them from their lands, or by suppressing their voice, or by denying them their legitimate and internationally recognized right to self-determination. Because we know that that's not going to work. For the brave, dignified, and resilient people of Palestine are not going to give up. They are not going to give up their right. and they're not alone. The entire international community is on their side. That support is going to be evident later this month at the General Assembly, not this Council, but at the General Assembly, where the international conference, the high-level conference on Palestine and the two-state solution is going to be held. And we are certain that it will be a resounding call for the Palestinian rights and irreversible path to two-state solution and Palestinian statehood and full membership of the United Nations. We shall revert to the Council as and when required, as has been said by the distinguished representative of Algeria, and we expect that the Council will shoulder its responsibility towards Palestine and in the interest of maintaining peace and security in the Middle East. I thank you.
Can I give the floor now to the representative of China?
Madam Chair, at the outset, let me congratulate Guyana on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month, and Greece on successfully completing presidency of the Council last month. China is deeply disappointed by the result of today's vote. The draft resolution on the humanitarian situation in Gaza tabled by the E10 of the Security Council clearly calls for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza and lifting of the blockade on humanitarian supplies therein. These are the most pressing demands of the people in Gaza who are struggling amidst death and despair, and they reflect the overwhelming voice of the international community. The United States has once again abused its veto power, extinguishing the glimmer of hope for the people of Gaza and ruthlessly continuing to leave over 2 million people in darkness. It must face questioning from the international community. People cannot help but ask, where is fairness and justice? For more than 600 days, over 54,000 people in Gaza have lost their lives. Israel continues to escalate its offensive and blockade, turning Gaza into a living hell. Innocent civilians are killed in the conflict every day, while a large portion of the population is on the brink of famine. The United Nations has clearly pointed out that the aid delivery mechanism promoted by the U.S. and Israel violates the principles of impartiality, independence, and neutrality. Recently, there have been repeated incidents of civilian casualties near distribution sites, and this mechanism has even become a death trap. The brutal facts have clearly shown that military means are not the solution. This conflict has long exceeded the limits of a hostage rescue operation. Israel must immediately cease military operations and fully restore access for humanitarian supplies. People cannot help but ask, where is the international rule of law? Since the outbreak of the conflict, we have witnessed the weaponization of humanitarian aid, the targeting of civilian infrastructure such as schools and hospitals, and the ruthless killing of journalists and humanitarian workers. Israel's actions have crossed every red line of the international humanitarian law and seriously violated Security Council and General Assembly resolutions, as well as the provisional measures ordered by the ICJ. Yet, due to the shielding by one country, these violations have not been stopped or held accountable. Observing international humanitarian law is an obligation all parties must fulfill. It is not optional. Any double standards or selective application will only erode the foundation of international rule of law and must be firmly rejected. People cannot help but ask, where is the authority of the Security Council? As the primary body responsible for maintaining international peace and security, the Council has been striving to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza and has long reached overwhelming consensus on ceasefire and humanitarian issues. Today's vote result once again exposes that the root cause of the Council's inability to quell the conflict in Gaza is the repeated obstruction by the U.S., who has vetoed the Council's request for ceasefire multiple times. And because of its shielding of Israel, several resolutions adopted by the Council have not been effectively implemented. Claims that Security Council action would interfere with diplomatic efforts are completely untenable. As long as diplomatic efforts are genuinely aimed at peace, the actions of the Council will only provide strong support. Madam President, the international community will never cease its efforts to pursue fairness and justice, uphold the international rule of law, and safeguard the authority of the Council. A veto by a single permanent member cannot stop the march toward peace. We urge the U.S. to face up to its responsibilities as a permanent Council member, abandon political calculations, and adopt a just and responsible attitude in supporting the Council to take all necessary actions. China stands ready to work with the international community to help end the conflict in Gaza, alleviate the humanitarian disaster, implement the two-state solution, and ultimately achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution of the Palestinian question. Thank you, Madam President.
Of China for his statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, we thank the elected members of the Council for the courage they have shown in their efforts to advance a very timely and useful draft resolution on which we had a vote today. We note in particular that the sponsors managed to, in a very short time, prepare a draft of a genuinely balanced and strong document which is aimed at an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and the lifting of the humanitarian blockade from Gaza. In current tragic circumstances, that is the bare minimum, or even we can call it the first aid kit that the international community has to provide in order to ease the suffering of peaceful Palestinians. Unfortunately, yet once again, the Council did not arrive at an outcome acceptable to all, and it could not adopt the kind of product which would have spared Gaza and the entire region from sliding further into chaos. Yet another opportunity was missed to show that the Security Council is ready to shoulder its responsibility for maintaining international peace and security in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has now lasted 8 decades. And I think that we all today had another opportunity to see who really wants peace in the Middle East and who wants to continue playing political games. Under current conditions, we place particular hopes on the upcoming, this month, high-level conference on the Middle East settlement, which is to take place in New York and to be co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France. It's important to make sure that it has a concrete outcome and aims at breathing new life into the idea of a two-state solution. For that purpose, the international community needs to display collective will and do its utmost to make sure that conditions are created, the conditions which are needed to resume the peace process. And we intend to have a most active participation in the conference. I thank you.
Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Tell us what you think in the comment section. Like and share the video, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our African videos. It's the best way to support us.